Tonight, I'm going to tell you 3 true stories. Stories the world tried to forget. Stories that sat buried in police archives, hidden in old newspapers, or whispered in towns that hoped no one would ever bring them up again. These aren't legends. They aren't myths. They happened to real people in moments where reality became stranger and darker than any horror movie. So turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's begin. Story 1, the man who chained himself to a tree. In the winter of 1881, Hill County, Texas, was a lonely place. Thick forests, scattered farms, and miles of quiet land where help was always too far away. And that's why when a local man named George Arnold vanished, the community reacted fast. George wasn't the type of man who disappeared. He was a devoted father of 7, a hardworking farmer, and a deeply religious man who followed strict routines. Everyone knew exactly where he would be every Sunday morning, sitting in the same wooden pew in the small local church. But on the morning he vanished, he broke that routine. His family was getting ready, putting on their best church clothes, when George quietly told his wife he wasn't going with them. That alone was strange enough. He had never missed a service in his entire adult life. But what frightened his wife was the look in his eyes. He wasn't sick. When the family returned from church a few hours later, the house was silent. George was gone. His boots were missing. And on the kitchen table was a short, unsettling note. He wasn't angry. He just looked defeated, like a man holding a horrible secret. When the family returned from church a few hours later, the house was silent. George was gone. His boots were missing. And on the kitchen table was a short, unsettling note. In it, he said he was going into the woods, that things could not be undone, and that he hoped God would forgive him. He ended by saying he loved his family more than anything, and begged them not to look for him. But of course they did. A search party was assembled that same day. Neighbors, church members, and the local sheriff combed through the forest, calling his name. For 2 days, nothing. Then on the morning of the 3rd day, the group stepped into a small clearing, and that's where they found him. George was sitting upright with his back against a huge oak tree, but the horror of what they saw froze them in place. His ankle was chained to the tree trunk, a heavy iron chain locked tightly with the key thrown several feet away. He was naked. His clothes were torn and shredded beside him. His skin was covered in deep scratches, bite marks, and raw wounds. At first, the men thought an animal had attacked him, until they noticed the bite marks looked human. And then someone spotted something on the ground near his feet. Small white shapes. Teeth. George's own teeth. Dozens of them, scattered around the dirt, some embedded in the bark of the tree, as if he had tried to bite his way through the trunk, destroying his mouth in the process. It looked impossible. Unbelievable. But the truth was horrifying. Every injury was self-inflicted. The truth finally came from a doctor who recognized the signs immediately. A week before his disappearance, George had been bitten by a stray farm dog, a dog that later tested positive for rabies. Today we treat rabies easily, but in 1881, it was a guaranteed death sentence. And worse, the final days were hell. Victims developed terrifying hallucinations, violent spasms, uncontrollable urges to bite, scream, scratch, and destroy anything nearby, including themselves. George knew exactly what was coming. He knew he would become dangerous. He knew he might hurt his wife, or his children. So he chained himself to a tree, so he wouldn't be able to hurt anyone, not even in his most uncontrollable moments. He died alone, terrified, and in agony. But he died protecting the people he loved. A horrifying act of violence. That was actually an act of love. Story 2, the letter from hell. In the fall of 1888, London was living a nightmare. A killer known as Jack the Ripper stalked the streets of Whitechapel, leaving brutal murders behind him and taunting the entire city. The police were overwhelmed. Newspapers spread fear like wildfire. Volunteers began patrolling the streets at night. One of these volunteers was George Lusk, head of the local vigilance committee. On October 12th, Lusk returned home after another long night and found a pile of letters waiting for him. Most were normal, until he noticed one envelope that looked different. Cheap paper, red ink, a strange, shaky handwriting. Inside was a message mocking him, claiming the writer was the killer, threatening new murders. Lusk immediately took it to the police, and they shrugged it off. They had received dozens of fake letters claiming to be from Jack the Ripper. This one looked no different, but everything changed 4 days later. Lusk came home to find a small brown package on his table. No return address. Inside, a piece of cardboard, a handwritten message, and wrapped in cloth, half of a human kidney. The letter began with 2 infamous words, "From hell." The writer claimed he had cut the kidney out of one of the victims, that he had cooked and eaten the other half, and that he was sending this portion as a gift. Doctors examined the kidney. It came from a human adult, from the correct side of the body to match one of the victims. And it showed signs of disease that the victim actually had in real life. To this day, historians still argue whether any Ripper letter was truly real. But the "From Hell" letter remains the most convincing piece of communication ever linked to the killer. A message sent straight to the man who was trying to stop him. As if the killer was saying, "You can watch all you want, but you'll never stop me." Story 3. The phone call that killed him. In the spring of 1985, a quiet teen named Jason Finley finally gathered the courage to call the girl he liked. A girl named Kathy. Jason had practiced what he wanted to say for days. He wasn't confident. He wasn't smooth. But he had this feeling that she liked him too. That night, a thunderstorm rolled across New Jersey. The sky flashed with lightning while Jason sat on his grandmother's sofa, staring at the landline phone. He took a deep breath, dialed her number, and waited. She answered with a soft hello. Jason smiled. He said her name. She laughed gently and said, "Hi, Jason." And then as lightning cracked outside, Jason dropped the phone and collapsed. He died instantly. His family rushed him to the hospital, confused and terrified. He was a healthy 17-year-old. No illnesses, no injuries. Doctors were baffled until they looked inside his ear. His eardrum had burst, burned. The explanation was almost unbelievable. Lightning had struck the telephone pole outside. The electrical surge traveled through the wiring, into the house, and out through the phone Jason was holding against his ear. The bolt entered his head and killed him instantly. Kathy later said she knew exactly why he was calling. She had been waiting for him to ask her out, and she was ready to say yes. A moment that was supposed to be sweet, hopeful, and innocent ended in one of the strangest accidental deaths in modern history. These stories remind us of something unsettling. The world doesn't need monsters or ghosts to be terrifying. Real life is more than enough. If you want more strange, true stories from around the world, make sure to subscribe, because next time, the stories get even darker.